Thank everybody, also the excellencies, different ambassadors, specifically also the ambassador for women's rights who came from the United States for this. Welcome to the Netherlands. And thank you very much for inviting me here today and for organizing this conference. For me, it is a very important conference. If you are successful for all of us and for the women of Afghanistan. And their contribution also to reconstruction and development. As you know, Afghanistan every day tops many countries' political, humanitarian and development agendas. Enormous steps have been taken over the last few years, and I have just visited Afghanistan not long time ago, and actually on many occasions. And I have witnessed on the issues where we're talking about it, real progress. Important infrastructure projects have been completed, including dams and irrigation channels. For instance, in the area we're working in Uzgan, a bazaar and manufacturing workshop is being built. Projects like this bring essential improvements to the daily lives of many Afghan women. But, I would say many challenges remain. Afghanistan is still one of the poorest countries in the world, with the lowest levels of education and the highest levels of maternal mortality in the world, as well as rampant crime and insecurity, especially for women, widespread corruption, and many other governance issues that we know of. At the forthcoming conference in London in 2 weeks' time and in Kabul later this year, we'll have full agendas on security, on governance, on cross-border issues, on the regional approach, on implementation of the Afghan government's program. But in my view, and I sincerely mean this can only be successful if women themselves can be center stage in these meetings. There is an increasing area that calls for serious ambition and determination here. And that is the issue of women's rights. And let me be very open with you. Although enormous progress has been made, it's one of the reasons why we are in Afghanistan. Maybe the most important reason. That is that under the Taliban, under the civil war, under parts of the history of Afghanistan, women have simply been neglected. And that's not a Western point of view. That's a point of view for all women in the world, including the Afghan women. And therefore, if that is one of the reasons why we are there, we have to be critical of what is actually happening. And my feeling is, and I'm very open about this, and that's why I think the London conference is so important, that women's rights are being mentioned by some as something that is there for second stage issue. For me, Richard, yes, of course, we talk about women's rights in Afghanistan, it's important. We need a few programs here and there. The key issue is that we are putting our efforts together to ensure that human rights and women's rights in Afghanistan has been installed. And I know it goes also about security, it goes about human security. And when we talk about human security, for me, this is essential. And let's also, therefore, not be too easy about what we have delivered so far. As a minister, it's easy for me to do so. And I want to ensure that we actually base our efforts on what has worked. But women's rights issues cannot be irrelevant. They should be at the core, and therefore women should participate themselves in the activities, in London, in Kabul, in our development efforts, in our political efforts. And there is a risk that this is not taking place in a sufficient way and manner. And let me now say it positive. The Minister has always to be positive, and I am positive. But I'm just saying this is important. And that's why I came also to this meeting. Not because it's a meeting on women's rights, because they're all important, but because we are talking all of us, and many of the forces in Afghanistan, but also elsewhere, and say maybe this is not such an important issue. Of course, we will mention it. But are we really putting the delegations that when we go to London at the forefront and put this issue not as number 16, but number 1 or 2 or 3. That is the issue which is at stake at this conference. And that is then built also on the enormous positive energy that has been energized because of some of the activities of many of you. Much has been done to improve the situation of Afghan women, particularly when it comes to access to healthcare and education. More and more Afghan girls are going to school. That's a difference for day and night for these girls. Since 2006, a new primary school for girls, 2 additional girls' secondary schools, and a school for higher education for girls have been built with Dutch support in the town of Karen-Koud. I just mentioned it as an example. There was nothing like that before. It is a difference of school, of day and night for the girls of Oerbus. At this moment, 5,000 girls attend primary education, and there are 45 female teachers in Oerbus, where there were none before. More mother and child mortality is staggering, but quickly decreasing. Today, about 60% of pregnant women in Oerbus receive prenatal tetanus shots, up from only 26 3 years ago. It's enormous progress. There are 17 female health workers, up from only 3 in 2006. These are great achievements in the context we're talking about, and that happens all over Afghanistan. But we have to admit that while working on these very relevant, basic, and sometimes even life-saving improvements, we, the international community, may have neglected the political or leadership roles Afghan women can and should play. And however difficult and dangerous the situation, there are many brave women in Afghanistan who stand up to be counted, who do not accept a role in the margins of society. They fight for a role in government, in organizations, in companies, in the media or in schools. And they are incredibly courageous. They risk their lives, since there are still forces that believe women have no rights to do this. Women like Zargona Walizada, who started her own transport business in 2003 after returning to Afghanistan from exile. At 38, she is now the owner and director of the biggest transport company in Afghanistan, employing 450 people, of whom 449 are men. Threats are part of her life. Since 2003, 13 of her truck drivers have been killed and 36 of her trucks have been set on fire. The threats she receives come not only from the Taliban, but also from her competitors, who are convinced that a woman in business is not an option. But for Zargona Walizada, giving up is not an option. She is committed to building her company. For the international community, giving up on women like Zargona Walizada should not be an option either. I believe it to be women's inalienable right to have an influence on politics and society in their country. This applies to all women, even if they live in Afghanistan. Women in Afghanistan have to be more courageous and more determined to achieve things that are taken for granted in other countries. It's much harder. Women like Police Officer Lieutenant Colonel Malakai Kaka, I'm going to mention the individuals because it makes it specific. Head of Kandahar's Department of Crimes Against Women. In September 2008, this mother of 6 children, in her early 40s, was killed by Taliban rebels. We killed Malalai Kaka, a Taliban spokesman told the news agency AFP. She was our target, and we successfully eliminated her. And in Oerbus is Malalai, a common Afghan woman, born and raised in a small and poor village near Karen-Koud. And I went to that village. After her husband, to whom she was married off at an early age, was killed by the Taliban, her life took a completely different turn. She promised herself she would stand up against the Taliban. She started organizing secret meetings for women and produced anti-Taliban propaganda, standing up for women's rights. This is why she got arrested by the Taliban, tortured and sexually abused her. Subsequently, Malalai ran away to Karen-Koud, where she continued her progress. Her actions led to the founding of the first women's organizations in that province, which soon counted hundreds of female supports from the surroundings of the And later on, she applied for a position with the Afghan National Police. She was the first woman ever to do so. A number